Huntsville, Texas, the 8th of November, 2017. Inside a small room, a man lies strapped to a table. His name is Ruben Cárdenas. In minutes, he will be dead. The warden leans in. He asks for final words. Cárdenas answers with just 2 words. No, sir. The drugs begin to flow. Within a minute, he stops breathing. But here is what makes this case different. While the needle went in, his lawyers were still fighting. They wanted new DNA testing. Testing that never happened. Testing that used modern technology his trial never had. And within hours, a foreign president would go public. He would accuse the United States of breaking international law. Tonight, we uncover how a family tragedy became an international storm. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit subscribe, because this story is far from over. Mayra Laguna was just 16 years old. She lived in McAllen, Texas, deep in the Rio Grande Valley. Her home was a public housing apartment, small but full of life. She shared a bedroom with her younger sister. 2 beds, 1 room, a normal teenage life. Her sister, Roxana Jones, remembers her clearly. She says Mayra was loving. She says Mayra was funny. She says when Mayra smiled, she had dimples that lit up her face. Mayra was a high school student. She had her whole life ahead of her. Friends, family, dreams that would never come true. But there was someone in her life who should have kept her safe. Someone she trusted. Someone who sat at family dinners. Someone who came to gatherings. Who was seen as blood, not a stranger. That someone was her cousin, Ruben Cárdenas. Family trust runs deep. Nobody in that apartment thought twice about him. Nobody locked doors because of him. He was family. He had access. He had opportunity. And in February 1997, that trust would be shattered forever. Mayra had no idea what was coming. She went to sleep that night, in the bed she shared with her sister. It was a night like any other. But somewhere out there, her cousin was making a choice that would end her life. This was not a stranger crawling through a window. This was family. This was someone who belonged in that room, in that home, in that family circle. And that is what makes this story so hard to accept. Ruben Cárdenas was born in Mexico, but he grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, the same region where Mayra lived. By the time of the crime, he had a job. He worked as a security guard. Think about that for a moment. A security guard is someone people trust to protect them. A security guard watches for danger. A security guard keeps others safe. Cárdenas did the opposite. There is no public record of warning signs before that night. No documented threats. No history of harassment on file. To the outside world, he looked like an ordinary man with an ordinary job. But one detail stands out. In his own words later given to police, Cárdenas admitted he was high on cocaine that night. He said it himself. He blamed the drug for what happened next. That admission is the closest thing we have to a warning sign. Not a pattern, not a history. Just a man, a drug, and a choice. The irony is hard to ignore. A man paid to protect people became the danger himself. A man trusted to watch over others turned that trust into a weapon. And that night, the badge and the uniform meant nothing. What came next would shock an entire community, and later, an entire country. February 1997, a cold night in McAllen, Texas. Mayra was asleep in her bedroom. Her younger sister was asleep in the very same room, just a few feet away. That night, Ruben Cárdenas entered the apartment. He walked into the bedroom where the 2 sisters slept. Think about how close this came to being different. One sound, one creak of the floor, one moment where the younger sister woke up. She could have seen him. She could have screamed. She could have changed everything. But she did not wake up. Cárdenas took Mayra from that bed. He took her out of her own home, past her own family, without anyone knowing. Outside, a car was waiting. But this was not just any car. It belonged to his mother. A car meant for family trips. A car meant for errands and holidays. That night, it became something else entirely. Mayra was placed inside. The car pulled away into the dark streets of McAllen. What happened inside that car next is impossible to believe. Ruben Cárdenas did not act alone that night. With him was a friend, José Antonio López Castillo. He was there during the abduction. He was there when Mayra was taken from her home. Now, let's be clear about something. This was not a murder for hire. There was no payment. There was no weapon bought for the job. Court records show no evidence of planning a killing in advance. This was something different. This was an abduction that spun out of control. 2 men, 1 car, and 1 decision that turned into something far worse than anyone could have imagined. Lopez Castillo would later face justice for his part in that night. Court records confirm he was convicted of aggravated kidnapping. He received a sentence of 25 years in prison. 25 years for helping take a 16-year-old girl from her home. But while Lopez Castillo would eventually serve his time behind bars, the man driving that car had far worse in store for Mayra. Before we go further into the darkest part of this story, take a moment, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from tonight, because what you are about to hear next is the hardest part of this entire case. It was still nighttime in McAllen, Texas. The car moved through the streets, carrying 2 men and 1 terrified teenage girl. Mayra was inside that car, taken from her own bed, taken from her own family. According to his own confession, later read out in court, Cárdenas said, "I didn't plan on doing this, but I was high on cocaine." Those words would follow him for the rest of his life. As the car kept moving, something happened inside it. Court records state that Cárdenas had sex with the 16-year-old girl. This was not consent. This was a grown man assaulting a child he called family. At some point, he untied her arms, maybe to let her go, maybe to give her a moment of relief. We do not know his true reason. But Mayra fought back. She resisted. She fought for her life in the back of that car, and Cárdenas struck her. He hit her in the neck. The blow was violent enough to change everything in an instant. According to his own words, Mayra began coughing up blood. She struggled to breathe. Her body was fighting to survive. Cárdenas said he tried to help her. He said he tried to revive her. It did not work. Mayra Laguna died in that car, at the hands of someone she should have been able to trust with her life. But the horror did not end there. According to his confession, Cárdenas tied her up. Then he took her to a canal. And in his own chilling words, he rolled her down a canal bank. A 16-year-old girl, discarded like nothing, left in the water near a lake in the Rio Grande Valley. No proper goodbye, no dignity, no mercy. It would not be long before her body was found. Near that same canal, close to a lake in the valley, searchers discovered her. A family's worst nightmare had become their reality. Word spread quickly through McAllen. A teenage girl, gone. A community, shaken to its core. But this was not the end of the story. This was only the beginning of a battle for justice that would stretch on for 20 long years. And when the truth of that night was finally read aloud in a courtroom, years later, what he did next would make even the courtroom go silent. When Mayra's family woke up that morning, they found her bed empty. Panic set in fast. A search began right away. Family members called out her name. Neighbors were asked if they had seen her. Every hour that passed felt heavier than the last. Then came the news no family should ever have to hear. Mayra's body had been found near a canal, close to a lake in the Rio Grande Valley. The search for a missing girl had turned into the search for answers about a murdered one. Grief spread through the family like nothing they had felt before. This was not a stranger's crime. This was someone close. Someone who had sat at the same table, who had shared the same blood. For years, that grief would sit heavy on the family's shoulders. Roxana Jones, Mayra's sister, would carry that pain the longest. She would later say, "Words can't begin to describe the relief it feels to know that there is true peace after so much pain and sorrow." But that peace was decades away. In the days after Mayra's death, all her family had was heartbreak, questions, and a desperate need for justice. Police moved quickly. On the 23rd of February 1997, just days after Mayra's body was found, Ruben Ramirez Cárdenas was arrested. He was brought in for questioning, and that questioning did not last minutes or hours. According to his defense lawyers, Cárdenas was held in isolation for 22 straight hours. 22 hours, alone, facing constant police questioning. It was during this time that Cárdenas gave his confession, the same confession that would later describe the abduction, the assault, and the killing in his own words. But his defense team, led by attorney Maury Levin, raised serious concerns. Court records show they argued the confession came only after intense pressure and prolonged isolation. They questioned whether it could truly be trusted. There was something else, too, something almost missed at the time. Cárdenas was not born in the United States. He was a Mexican citizen, and under international law, That meant he had the right to contact the Mexican consulate for help. Nobody gave him that notice. At the time, it seemed like a small detail, a missed step, a rule buried in paperwork. Nobody in that interrogation room knew it yet. But one overlooked rule would trigger an international incident years later, one that would reach all the way to the President of Mexico. The confession changed everything. Inside that interrogation room, Ruben Ramirez Cárdenas admitted what he had done. He admitted to having sex with 16-year-old Mayra Laguna. He admitted to hitting her. He admitted to disposing of her body near the canal. For investigators, this was the breakthrough they needed. A detailed account, in his own words, of the entire crime. But police did not stop with Cárdenas. They also focused on his friend, José Antonio López Castillo, the man who had been present during the abduction. Court records show López Castillo was charged separately. He faced justice for his role in taking Mayra from her home. He would later be convicted of aggravated kidnapping. Together, the confession and the case against López Castillo gave prosecutors a clear picture. One man had confessed to the killing. The other had admitted through conviction to helping take her. There was no murder weapon to trace. There was no long trail of forensic evidence like in other cases. Court records confirm the case relied heavily on the confession itself, along with circumstantial evidence tying Cárdenas to the crime. For the state of Texas, it was enough. For Cárdenas, it meant standing trial for capital murder. For Mayra's family, it meant one step closer to answers. But the true legal battle, the one that would last 20 years, was only just beginning. Ruben Ramirez Cárdenas stood trial for what he had done to Mayra Laguna. The charges were serious: abduction, sexual assault, capital murder. The court heard his own confession. The court heard about the canal where her body was found. In the end, the jury reached its decision. Cárdenas was convicted on all counts. For a crime this serious, Texas law allowed for the harshest punishment possible. The court handed down a death sentence. But a death sentence did not mean the story was over. In fact, it was only the start of a legal fight that would stretch on for 2 decades. His lawyers filed appeal after appeal. One major argument centered on his consular rights as a Mexican citizen, rights that were never given to him at the time of his arrest. Another argument focused on science. His defense wanted new DNA testing, using modern technology that did not exist at the time of his original trial. They believed it could raise fresh doubts about the case. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed this request. They rejected it. The court ruled that Cárdenas had not shown new testing would likely change the outcome. Still, his legal team pushed forward, all the way to the highest court in the country, and what the Supreme Court decided hours before his death is impossible to believe. For 20 years, Ruben Ramirez Cárdenas sat on death row. 20 years of appeals, 20 years of waiting, 20 years of legal battles that stretched across state and federal courts. Then came the 8th of November, 2017, his execution date. On that very day, his lawyers filed one final appeal to the United States Supreme Court. They argued his due process rights were being violated. They asked for more time. They asked the justices to stop the execution so the courts could review his case one more time. The Supreme Court rejected the appeal. No comment, no explanation, just silence. Because of these last-minute filings, the execution was delayed by about 4 hours. But delay was not denial. That night, inside the death chamber in Huntsville, Cárdenas was given a lethal dose of a drug called pentobarbital. Asked for his final words, he said only, "No, sir." Witnesses say he took a couple of breaths. Then, he began snoring. Within less than a minute, all movement stopped. At 10:26 in the evening, he was pronounced dead. He became the 7th person executed in Texas that year. Word spread fast, and it did not stay within the borders of the United States. Shortly after his death, Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto spoke out publicly. He condemned the execution. He said it violated an international court ruling. He sent his condolences to the grieving family. An execution in a small Texas prison had become an international incident. And what about the man who helped take Mayra from her bed that night? José Antonio López Castillo was still alive, still behind bars, serving out his 25-year sentence for aggravated kidnapping. 2 men, 2 very different endings. One faced the death chamber. The other still had years left to serve. No more appeals, no more filings, no new DNA testing. No do-over. For Ruben Ramirez Cárdenas, that was the end. Final. Permanent. For Mayra Laguna's family, it meant something different. It meant closure, after 21 long years. Roxana Jones said it best. Words can't begin to describe the relief it feels to know that there is true peace, after so much pain and sorrow. Think about the irony of this case. A man who wore the badge of a security guard, a job built on trust and protection, became the one person his own cousin should have feared most. Mayra Laguna should be alive today. She should have grown up, built a life, made her own family. Instead, her story ends in a courtroom and in a canal in the Rio Grande Valley. So tell us, what moment in this story hit you the hardest? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want more true crime cases like this one, subscribe now, because there is always another story waiting to be told.